1. Okay, so the hotel was super busy that night. There were 52 arrivals on my shift alone. Many of them were part of a block that was staying for a couple nights. One woman insisted that she had made a reservation for that night instead of the next night, even though I was the one who took her reservation and confirmed the date of arrival twice. So she got her room that night, which meant we were oversold on NQQ1 rooms, and would have to find someone to upgrade to a suite. And the one suite we had left to sell was the only room left in the entire hotel. My manager called 2 people, first said no, second, the dude this story is about, said no, absolutely not. Luckily, a young couple was more than happy to be upgraded to a suite. Problem solved. All the rooms were sold out and there would be 100% occupancy that night. Back to the block. The block was mostly older people, 50s and 60s, so I expected them to be quiet people, make some coffee, chat with each other, go to bed early, because they were out doing whatever activity the next morning. They brought a couple snacks and board games down to the breakfast area and pushed some tables together. Okay, whatever. And then more of the group came down, and they brought alcohol with them. So it's 10 at night, and these people were drunk, snacking, and straight up yelling while playing their board games, totally obnoxious. A dude comes out of his room and complains about the noise. I get it, I'm sympathetic. I also hate noisy people in the lobby area, and he wanted to get some sleep that night. I apologized and told him that I'd speak to the group. He said, "No, the group isn't the problem here, it's not their fault. It's where my room is. It was built like that deliberately so anyone in it could hear everything going on outside." I'm pretty sure the noise coming from the group is indeed the group's fault, but whatever. I apologized again and told him that I'd speak to the group. He said, "No, I don't want you to speak to the group. It's not their fault. The room is just built like that. I want you to move me to another room." "I'm sorry, sir, but we're all sold out tonight. I can't move you to another room." "So you've already checked in every single other person?" What? "You're telling me that you've already checked in every single person that's supposed to be here tonight?" No, but..." "Then you can move me to another room." "That's not how it works. Our housekeepers have already left. Nobody is here to clean the room." "I didn't even use anything. I just sat at the desk. It doesn't need to be cleaned. Just give it to someone else." I blink in disbelief. "Sir, we can't just give a room you've been in for 3 hours to another person without having it cleaned first." "I'm just trying to figure out how I went from being offered a suite to being given the worst room in the hotel. This is ridiculous." "Sir, I cannot give you another room. We're all sold out. I will ask the group to quiet down, but beyond that, I cannot do much else. I'm sorry." And he just huffs and rolls his eyes and stalks back to his room. I didn't hear from him again until the rest of the night. That's the first time I've heard that one. If not everyone is checked in yet, you can still give me another room. That's not how it works, first of all. Secondly, I've never had a single guest be telling me the truth when they claim that they haven't used anything in the room. And lastly, maybe you should have taken the suite when we offered it, motherfucker. I mean, really, what did he expect? 2. I manage a small hotel on the Oregon coast with a population of less than 900 people. My wife is black, and I think I can count the number of other black residents on one hand. I know it doesn't matter, but this information does play a part in the overall story. I may ramble a bit, but it's only because I want to fit in as much as I can remember about the shit this lady was saying. Last Friday, I was getting ready to close for the night when a black lady driving a U-Haul pulls up. I go out to greet her, and she immediately asks me if I can help a lady in crisis. I tell her that I most certainly can, and she makes a point to mention that there are racists at other motels. I use this opportunity to tell her about my wife and jokingly mention how it seems like every time someone in town meets a black person, they have to tell them about their black friends. You know how it is. She laughs, but then makes me call my wife on speakerphone to ask if I am allowed to help her. Red flag. Then she just starts babbling about how she was raised by killers. She was a professor at a college in California. She's taking this U-Haul to Washington border and then running into Canada to fly down to Mexico to escape authorities, as she is a person of interest, etc., etc. She's essentially throwing red flags at me by the handful, but I took a liking to her as she was a black lady in a conservative part of Oregon. My wife had to deal with that, and I wanted to help this lady as much as possible. She's all over the place. She starts by asking me to lay sheets down on the floor as she was a germaphobe, and she steps out of the truck with rubber gloves on her feet. Then she kept mentioning that if it comes to a point where I no longer feel comfortable helping her, then I should say the words pauhuna, which is Hawaiian for work finished. Then she berates me, calls me a white, and shames me for not taking my wife to Hawaii or on dates in general. Then I take her to her room and bring her a plate of food as she was hungry. She used this opportunity to tell me she used to date DMX and Dave Chappelle, and that they both tried to fuck her, but she wouldn't let them. Then she told me she loved my wife, but if my wife ever crossed her, then she would fuck me on national television. Seriously, I could fill a book with the ramblings from this woman. I warned my assistant manager about the lady, as she was on duty the next day. I told her to call me if there's any trouble. Sure enough, I get a call 5 minutes after she opens the office. This lady is asking for my wife and I by name, and telling me that she'll sue me for either 10 cents or $1 billion if I don't accommodate her. At this point, the charm has worn off, and I tell her she needs to leave. I hand her the money back for the room, as she clearly wasn't satisfied. She starts screaming at other guests and telling me I better not call the police or I will die at 11:59 p.m. I call the police. They show up, and there's essentially a standoff for about 4 hours. They tell her that she needs to pack her shit and leave, and this woman is a togo nixing the cops. She is asking to be shot while naming other incidents of racial brutality, spanning all the way back to Emmett Till. Then she starts naming off movies and actresses from the 40s while waving pepper spray around, if anyone gets too close. I offer to sneak around the building and lock her out of the room to force her to leave, as we can always gather the stuff up later for her to take with her. The officer gives me the okay, and he tries to keep her occupied by the U-Haul. I take a peek in the room, and she has bags of her belongings everywhere, as well as piles of cash on the bed. I lock the door, but run around to tell the officer about the money. I offer to unlock it so as to give her a chance to retrieve her money. I don't want that on my conscience. He agrees, and I unlock it. After a few hours, the officers are getting pissed. This lady is extremely intelligent, and she is using it to her advantage. One of the officers looks like a normal white guy, but apparently he is of Lebanese descent. She picks up on it and calls the officer a Muslim piece of shit, and it quickly angered him. He ended up grabbing some of her things and throwing it into the U-Haul in an attempt to hurry her up. The officer is so pissed off that he accidentally threw our laundry cart in there too. We won't be seeing that again. Then she focuses on me and brings my wife's name up. I can't remember exactly what she said, but I remember getting a ball in the pit of my stomach and deciding I was done with this. I asked the officer for permission to throw the remainder of her belongings in a bedsheet and bring them out to her. He agrees, and I politely ask for him to keep her occupied, as she threatened to mace a guest. I run around the building and sneak up to her room, where I lock the door behind me. Not 5 seconds later, I hear the door handle jiggle. I ignore it and start throwing her things into a sheet. I would later find out the cops attempted to rush her when they saw her head back towards the room, but they backed away when they realized I locked the door behind me. The officer had looked at my assistant, smiled, and let out a sigh of relief. I was tempted to pocket some of the cash, I won't lie, but I restrained myself as not to give her a reason to come back. I tied everything up, walked out the door, and threw it into the back of the U-Haul. I looked at her, told her, "Pauhuna," and walked away. She said, "Yeah, Pauhuna, motherfucker. No, you're gonna die at 7:02 p.m. Then she drove away. I did some research on her after she left, and she was a professor. She had a PhD and taught gender studies and pop culture, which makes sense. Even the reviews about her from college students mentioned that she was kind of crazy and way unfair. Then I looked up her Facebook and saw the same kind of rants posted on there. It seems like only one person from Nigeria would like any of her statuses. Anyways, I guess I just had to tell the story as it completely changed my outlook on mental illness. Here's a woman who was intelligent as fuck, yet still batshit crazy. I mean, why would you worry about germs in a motel when you're walking around asphalt wearing rubber gloves on your feet? I know they had to be ripped up on the underside. Germs were the least of her worries. 3. 2 weeks ago, late on a Saturday, a young man calls the office. He asks for a double, which we do not have. He says a single will work, but we take cash, right? No, sir, we do not. Well, may he pay with a check? I reply that no, a full approval must go on a credit card first. If the GM will accept a check when they leave, they must work that once they come in. The young man says thank you and good night most politely. This was around bar let-out time, maybe 1:30 a.m. An hour after that, an older man calls, telling me he wants to pay for someone else's room, and is ready to give the card over the phone. I'm confused, so I apologize, as that is not allowed.
What do you mean, no cards? You don't take cash, no checks? How do you make money at this hotel?
I explained the process of setting up a credit card authorization, but of course, all of that is stupid, and this guy needs to pay for this room now. He got really nasty with me, but was arguing with someone else next to him, and half ignored my attempts to speak. So I let him get distracted again and hung up the phone. This whole scene felt like common post-last call idiocy from some bar patrons. But I was in for a surprise. So, this jerk begins calling back non-stop. I turn all the ringers down and let him do his thing for about 5 minutes. I then pick up the phone. Saw his name on caller ID, so I hung up without a word. He kept calling back over and over, dialing as soon as the ringing dropped off. So now the phone had been ringing for 15 minutes straight. I was unfazed. I have the patience and pettiness to do this for hours. And I go home at 7 a.m. Well, in walks a police officer, a woman. I say hello and ask how I can help her, and she immediately gets gruff and authoritative and says, "You need to pick up your phone. An officer has been trying to call." I reply, "Hold up. I've been getting harassing calls from a man," and then I give his name, "and that is why I'm not answering the phone." She tells me that the man in question is a police officer, and if I know what's good for me, I'll do what he says. Record break. Like scratch. She instantly pissed me off, and I snapped back, "This whole interaction is entirely unacceptable. Absolutely not. What business does this man have as a police officer calling up a hotel and threatening staff for being safe? If Mr. X does not like the hotel's policies, this is not the way to do anything about it. No rooms for you guys." My heart was in my throat as I'm a timid and anxious person, but now in my old age I can really surprise myself now that I'm so jaded and unbothered through experience. Yay. Anyway, she gives me daggers. Her body language said she wanted to jump over the counter and kneel in my throat. She said in a very snotty and threatening tone that she would inform the other officer that I was refusing their business. The initial adrenaline rush of simply saying no to a police officer had passed. I did not say a word. I knew my voice would crack. She followed up with,
"We'll be keeping an eye out for you."
And that's it, my tale. I checked with the hotel next to us, as they're like allies, even if the competition. Sure enough, the police went there. They had no issue. The female officer provided a card for payment right away. The room was for the initial young man caller. He was family to the jerk officer and asked for his help when he got too plastered to drive home. I gave a full report to my boss, and they said they would support me if I decide to make a report to the local station. I do not think I will. I've been on edge for 2 weeks, fearing that the police will retaliate in some way. Follow me home, ticket me, plant dope. I hope that they are off to their next batch of bullshit and forget about me. I still need to call and ask for help with the violent public at times, and do not want to push so hard they ignore such calls for help. 4. We all know we've all had absolutely mad guests multiple times over, but honestly, this one for me just takes the cake. Let me start with the backstory. So I had a definite male Karen the other day, just super rude and impatient. I should mention that on this day, I'm also training a new FDA on his very first evening shift. My work decided that it was fine to just have the two of us, despite the fact that it was his first evening shift. We didn't have many arrivals to start, but it built up to a good 40 or 50. For extra context, the evening shifts at my hotel are an hour shorter, but that only ends up meaning we have more to do in less time in a way, because said shifts start right at the beginning of check-in time. Anyways, because of this, everything would naturally take longer than usual because as we're working, I'm teaching this guy everything he needs to learn. Pretty standard for training. Apparently, this guest didn't seem to think that and was very impatient about the fact that I was doing my job by training a new employee and had a big attitude and was completely rude the entire time I was checking him in. By the way, if you're a guest that snatches your card from a clerk for any reason, just know I hate you. Now, for the most bonkers part of my story, today the same guest comes down at some point for change for the guest's laundry. Okay, fine. Of course, I remember who he is, but I'm overly nice, because that's how I like to deal with Karens. I won't bend over backwards for them or go the extra mile, nor will I go against the smallest policy. But I will do it all while being super sweet and apologetic, even though I absolutely give zero fucks. Because of this, some people actually apologize to me for their behavior later on. To me, this feels way better because now I'm like their mum in this situation, who has taught them not to be a child with a tantrum anymore. For reference, I used to teach preschool before working hospitality, so I pretty much treat a large portion of my guests the same as I would of my 3-year-old class. Anyways, the guy is actually fairly nice this time, so I figure he must have been having a bad day or whatever the night before, and mentally move on. Maybe an hour later he comes back, saying his gloves are missing from the dryer. What? He believes someone stole them out of the dryer and wants us to watch the video feed. I do explain to him that I can't access that. I can only access the live feed and would have to call management for something like that. He insisted I do so, because without his gloves he will freeze tomorrow, and they are leaving early in the morning. He made my boss come back to work to watch the feed from earlier to see if anyone opened the dryer and stole his gloves. For reference, I do live in a small rural town without a Walmart or anything, but there was an open dollar store, a grocery store, and gas station that all sold gloves. I didn't offer this option because we're not supposed to do that, but he didn't even ask about anywhere. In fact, he even said he would file a police report about his missing gloves. My boss had me watch the footage with her when she came in to do so that there would be 2 of us having seen it. Nobody touched his dryer. I called him and informed him of this. During the call, he stated that they must have magically disappeared then, and even asked me which dryer he used to see if I actually had watched the video. My boss went back home and I got back to my work. Maybe an hour later, he returns to the desk to tell me he still can't find his gloves. I don't know what to tell him except to tell him, I'm sorry about that. He then starts questioning me about whether I actually watched the video and who the other people in the laundry room that day were, even going so far as to insinuate that it was someone that worked at the hotel. I simply told him that they were guests, but no other information, and he left, but was not really happy. I wish I could make this shit up. 5. I used to share stories quite a bit. 5 years ago now? Since that time, I've escaped the shit wages at my hotel, almost lost my mind and my soul working in accounting for several years, fully embraced my transness, and moved to a new continent for grad school. I just thought I'd share the tale of the night that made me fully realize I needed a new career path. It was starting to ramp up into the holidays, so our 80-room hotel was pretty full, and rates were higher than they'd been in a few months. I was working night audit at the time, 9 p.m. to 7 a.m. I got in one snowy night, and the afternoon kid immediately booked it out the door. He never turned away the weirdos, but he had an unerring instinct when a guest he checked in was going to be trouble. If he didn't dare to face me, something was definitely up. All was quiet for a couple of hours. The last check-ins made their way in without incident, and I locked the exterior doors at 11. Maybe 5 minutes after that, the phone rings. This is the city police department. We received reports of a disturbance at your hotel. Officers are on their way. Great. Someone's probably being a bit loud, and someone else chose the nuclear option instead of calling the front desk like a normal human being. I waited for the officers to arrive, and opened the doors for them when they showed up. They asked if I had someone staying in a certain room, saying they got a call that someone was being threatened with a knife in that room. Wonderful. Now, we didn't have a lot of excitement at that hotel. I'd seen one person arrested in the 3+ years I'd been working there. Certainly no one was getting threatened or stabbed. I was slightly skeptical of the reports. They asked if they could check the room. Sure, go ahead. I'll knock $20 off the irate guest rate or something if it turns out they have the wrong hotel. You can probably tell I was already completely out of cares to give here. I offered to go with them with the master key. They declined and told me, hold tight, at the desk. While they were up there, I checked back on the security cameras. 2 young women left through a back door at 11. Otherwise, all I saw was check-ins I dealt with, no knives in sight. The officers came back down and reported to me that no one was answering the door. They asked for the cell number registered to the room and called her on speaker. A young woman picked up and was incredibly confused. Yes, she checked into the hotel earlier, but she was 8 months pregnant and started having weird contractions, so she had headed to the ER up the road. No one else was in the room. She was traveling alone, and she'd been waiting for the last 3 hours. At this point, I was about 99% sure that the cops had the wrong hotel. They apologized for the drama and left. Right after that, I got a call in the hotel phone. It's a guest from that room. She was very distraught about the cops calling and asking her if she'd stabbed someone in her theoretically empty hotel room. And understandably, it didn't feel safe staying here if people were running around with knives. I apologized and explained that I was sure they had the wrong hotel, but I completely understood. She could come get her stuff and I would cancel the room without a fee. I was the most senior member of the entire hotel staff and the only fully trained night auditor. What was the GM gonna do, fire me? She gratefully accepted and said she'd be back in an hour or so. I told her I was going to kill the keys to her room, just in case someone else did have one, and she could come show me her ID when she got back, and I'd let her in to go get her stuff. Gung-ho cops just cost us a room for the night, but whatever. In order to kill the keys at that hotel, I had to cut a new key at the desk, and use it on the room door to cancel the old keys. So I made a new key, ran it up to the 3rd floor, noted that the TV was on in the room, then went back down. 90 minutes later, I got a call. She sounded out of breath but assured me she was almost back, so she'd be there within the hour. Okay. No alarm bells were starting to ring. The ER was 5 minutes up the road, 15 if you're walking. An hour? That wasn't right. Another 90 minutes passed. This time she called, just sounded deeply resigned. Yeah, we're getting arrested. It's a pain. Can my cousin come get my stuff for me instead? Sure. Why not? I didn't want to deal with this crap. I get her cousin's name and tell her she'll have to show ID to get into the room. After getting off the phone, I headed up to double-check that the room had been rekeyed, and realized that the TV was now off. So someone must have been in the room since I'd been up earlier. Nope. I called non-emergency police because at the time I was tiny and femme and not about to go knocking on an apparently occupied room with stabby people in it. They agreed to send officers to help me clear the room. Honestly, I should have just left it until the morning. I was hoping they'd just be back up when I double-checked that no one was in the room and would leave. No such luck. The officers who showed up had a man on the ride-along that night, so they had to look tough. Guns drawn, pounding on the door, bellowing,
"This is city, please open the door. City, please."
In the hall at 3 a.m. When they didn't get a response, they had me unlock the door, then went in like G.I. Joes, swiveling around corners, guns first, shouting, "Clear!" Back and forth the whole 9 yards. Great, thanks guys, just what I wanted. They eventually decided the room was sufficiently intimidated, and came out to let me know there was evidence of illegal activity, but nothing too concerning. I let the cousin in to retrieve the belongings when she showed up. They turned on every light in the suite, so after thanking them for their help, I went to turn them off. Gotta be green and all that. I reopened the door and headed in. The first thing I saw was the massive fuck-off knife on the kitchenette counter. That thing had to be over a foot long. Certainly not something the kitchenette was equipped with. Thanks for leaving that, cops. The second thing I saw was dildos. Dildos everywhere. There were 3 on the counter. 5 huge, bright pink ones on the coffee table. 1 suction-cupped on the side of the counter. I have no idea how many scattered across the floor. There was several $1,000s in sex toys there. I did not turn out the lights. I went downstairs. When the cousin showed up at 6 a.m., I went with her, propped the door open, and told her I didn't want to know what she did in there, but she had 10 minutes to get everything out. 8 minutes later, she took 3 big duffel bags downstairs and left. I rekeyed the room again just for funsies. I left detailed notes for the morning shift, told her exactly what had happened, and apologized for not double-checking the room, and for whatever the housekeepers found in there. I went home for my weekend, and never heard anything else about it. That's when I started to search for a new job. The final straw was several months later, when the GM tried to deny the only PTO I'd applied for in the 3 years I'd worked there. I fought him on it, he caved, and as soon as I had the approval in writing, I informed him that I would not be back after my 2-week vacation. I am now a full-time student, and hats off to everyone still working in the hospitality industry. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Coahw, episode 99. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Now if you could please hit that like button, share the video around with friends and families, and if you got a second, look in the description, you'll find all the wonderful Hellfreezer related links. You got the Twitters, Patreon, there's a merch store, there might be other stuff I'm forgetting too. There's probably still a Facebook link, but I don't actually use that anymore. I really should get around to removing that from thousands of videos. Yeah, that's going to be fun. Alrighty, let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is, what alternate name or word for something, but you recently learned there's another term for it? It could be anything, it could be a food thing. Mine's going to be a food thing, spoilers. But it could be anything, a name of a country, a type of thing, a language, a scientific concept, anything. For me, it's kind of shameful that it didn't click sooner. I didn't realize that fig Newtons, something which is sold in the US, are basically just fig rolls, they're in most stores in the UK. Very easy to find. Quite cheap too, actually. I'm quite fond of them. Or the brand Lay's potato chips, very popular in the United States. We have those here as well, except same kind of packaging, same logo, except it says Walkers instead of Lay's. And then, of course, you get into the whole Kraft Dinner and the various names that has in different countries. We call it cheesy pasta here, Kraft Dinner in Canada, and I believe Kraft Macaroni and Cheese, just kind of straightforward in the US. It might have it probably will have other names in different countries because of different languages, but you know what I mean. It's always really fun to learn that sort of thing, and I look forward to learning from you guys. So please leave your answers in a comment below. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.